Hello, this is Steve Reed, creator of LDS Symbol Cards, and I'd like to take a few minutes to tell you a little bit about their history and how you could use them. The first version of LDS Symbol Cards were very primitive. I would literally just cut out pieces of cardstock with a Sharpie. I would draw a symbol, and then with a pencil on the back, I would just write some of the various potential meanings and possible variations and numbers that would go along with it as I would study. And as I would kind of research these things, I would expand on each of these cards and try to make connections between them. And I began to notice that this was actually quite useful. So I created another version. And as you can see, this is version 2.0. So this isn't a very high-tech case. But the next version, I started kind of looking at the geometry of the various shapes and exploring them a little more. Now I've got things laid out just a little bit nicer, a little bit more organized, and I was feeling pretty good about this. And they were actually pretty helpful. And I would print these out and I would show them to my kids. I'd say, hey kids, want to play I Spy? See if you can find one of these. What's this called? And they'd say, oh, it's a hexagon. And we had to kind of learn what some of these shapes are, which was good because my girls they're still really young and learning about these things. So it's good to know shapes, but it's also been very interesting to watch them learn about the potential symbolism and theology behind some of these things as well. So they would look around the house for octagons and Vesica Pisces, which is one of their favorite things to say. So they're funny. This is the next version, which was drawn all over by one of my daughters. I'm not sure which one. 3.0. So basically, these were a little bit more refined. I had some geometric type things going on in the front of the cards, which I discontinued in the final versions. But these ones had a different color background. They weren't just plain white anymore. It actually helped tell the difference, between the two. I noticed having a different colored background helped when these got all jumbled together. It helped you separate them. I would scratch things out. I would reverse the order on things. I would kind of alter the numbers and change things. But after a while, I just decided to make these alphabetical so that there was no kind of preference toward any particular potential meaning. And I think that was a safe route to go. Version 4.0, or rather probably 7 or 8, because I did make a lot of revisions of these between the last version and throughout the process of my first Kickstarter attempt and my second successful Kickstarter attempt. And this right here is the symbol card guide. I put one of these in every set of symbol cards I send out. And fingers on a chalkboard. So these basically tell you what the cards are all about. So the front shows kind of the main symbol. Then we have some geometric properties, and these are different in each card. And some cards don't have them at all. Like the moon shows the 8 phases of the moon on it. And this one basically doesn't have any numerical properties. It shows the different kinds of stars that are out there, so on and so forth. This one's really fun. It's so fun to explore the meaning behind spirals. Really, really fun. The colors are also ways to connect them. If you pull out every single color of that one particular card and study some of the meanings behind them, you'll notice that they're all connected in very interesting ways. And you'll kind of find that there's a spiral here, there's a spiral there, there's a tree of life symbol here, there's a tree of life symbol there. And you'll kind of see some various connections between things. And it gets even more fun when you flip them over on the back. And you'll see the themes of life, life here, atonement. You'll see life again, rebirth, renewal, transition, life again. So there are some of these themes that are repeated across various symbols. And I use the colors to kind of join those together. Now, you might research some of these things and say, well, this should be a red card instead of a green. That's fine. Sure. A lot of things about symbolism are very subjective. There are a few things that are fairly solid, and that's what I tried to kind of settle down on. So one of the ways you can utilize symbol cards is by combining some of these cards together. And I'll give you a little example on how to do that. One of the things I noticed in one of Val Brinkerhoff's books was something about LDS steeples, and also steeples on LDS temples, things like that. A lot of times you'll find, like on the Nauvoo Temple, various chapels, lots of other temples out there, you'll have a square base, an octagon center, and a circular kind of top. You'll see this pattern kind of repeated. And he was explaining kind of the meaning of the square and the circle. And you basically have earth and heaven. And I've got some of those kind of things referenced here on the back. The circle was a good representation of the heavens because it stood for kind of, the bowl of the heavens. When you looked up, the sky forms this kind of great circle over your heads. Whereas 4, you have the 4 quarters of the earth, the 4 pillars of the earth, the 4 directions, the square, the body. The number 4 is the first time you actually get volume, that you can create volume. So it's a good way of indicating mortality, physical existence. So you have earth, you have heaven, and then you have 8 in between. Well, what is 8? There's a lot of European kind of older baptistries and things that will have 8 sides and octagon-shaped fonts with 8 pillars around them. You see LDS children are baptized at 8 years of age. You had 8 souls that were saved by the ark. You had 8 barges that were prepared by the Jaredites. The number 8 all over the place is kind of connected to this idea of renewal and regeneration. And that's according to kind of biblical and scriptural examples, but there's a lot of other stuff on this that is out there that isn't particularly Christian or LDS. And it's amazing how these things kind of cross cultures. And on the back of this card, I just want to read this one because I think this is really fun. It says, "The octagon draws on the symbolism of the number 8, emblematic of renewal. 8-sided forms were felt to mediate between the symbolism of the square, representing earthly existence, like we talked about, and the circle, standing for heaven or eternity." So you have the mediator between heaven and earth. And as you can see, it's kind of a square with corners knocked off. It's turning more into a circle. And remember that quote from Joseph Smith, "I'm like a rough stone rolling." I'm just paraphrasing. He says, every time I impact something, it knocks a corner off me till I become a polished shaft in the quiver of the Almighty. Something like that, just off the top of my head. So you have this kind of mediating form here. Now, when you're looking at temples, and I study the Las Vegas temple a lot, I noticed there were these kind of earth stones at the bottom. And and I call them earth stones, that's what they're called. You have earth stones, moon stones, sun stones, because it used to be carved into the stone in some of the older temples. Sometimes they're in glass, some of the stained glass of the windows. And so you'll a lot of times see this particular sequence, kind of like this. Let me set this up a little bit for you. So you have earth, moon, sun, and stars. And this kind of shows the order of the universe from our relative position. As we look out into the sky, the next closest object is the moon. Next closest, obviously there are planets in there. But then you have the sun and then the stars. And it's showing this greater distance between us and the rest of the cosmos. So it's kind of like we're here, and it expands out higher and more exalted out into the universe. I'm going to pull this star out right now because you can make a whole other video based on incorporating that in here, so I'm not going to do that at this time. But there's kind of 2 interesting similarities here. So we have the earth stones, we have the square representing the earth, and then we have the sun, which is also circular, and it's up in the heavens giving light. The celestial kingdoms represented by the sun. We see in 1 Nephi, Lehi's vision, he sees Jesus Christ, and it says his glory was like that of the sun in the sky or in the firmament, something like that. But so you have the sun, the heaven and the earth, and then you have these two here that are in the center. Well, what similarities are there between the moon and an octagon? So if this is kind of a mediating shape and has connections to Jesus Christ, renewal, rebirth, sacred space, transition. If we look on the back of this card as well, we'll see kind of some similar themes. Birth, cycles, Jesus Christ, light, purification by water. It's a feminine symbol. There's connections to the cycles that women experience, which are connected to birth. And so we kind of see some similarity here. The significance of this is on the Las Vegas temple. The moonstones only appear on the south side of the building, another story, between the baptistry and the celestial room. And so the moonstones occur in between those two floors, kind of mediating between one and the other. Thought that was really kind of interesting. That also, I believe, is a connection as to why they're on the south side of the temple. South anciently was the covenant side. If you were looking east as a Hebrew, that was the presence of God, and to the right was the south. It was your covenant hand. The name Benjamin means son of the right hand, if I remember correctly, something to that effect. So by putting these things together, you can kind of see similarities. During the sacrament, one of the things I like to do is just kind of pull out a couple of cards that have various symbols that I might observe. Anytime you're dealing with covenants, I always pull out the 2 card. In Hebrew, the word covenant means to cut, or like in the sense of cutting. And there's a really interesting history behind it. Abraham divides all these animals up, and then we see the Lord kind of as a light or a lantern pass between and the parts, and he says, I've made a covenant with you. And later on, we see the Red Sea parting, and Moses parts through the midst of the sea. Christ institutes a sacrament by dividing, cutting the bread. We see in the Book of Mormon, Captain Moroni rending his coat and writing the words that are essentially kind of a covenant upon it, and everyone else comes up ripping their coats, dividing it. And we see the bread in the sacrament today being cut, being divided into smaller pieces. And they're not just doing that for convenience or hygienics. That's one convenient purpose, but anytime the sacrament is blessed, you're supposed to divide it. That's kind of part of it, which is really interesting. Broken bread. Bread grows from the earth. It comes from the earth. We read on the back, we see earth, body. Christ said, this represents my body, and remembers the body I've shown unto you. He tells the Nephites. Bread grows from the earth. Jesus says the field is white, already to harvest. His people are wheat. They're bread. They grow. They come from the earth. We come from the dust, and from the dust we shall return. And so we have, when we're eating of the bread, we're remembering, as Christ tells the Nephites, the body I've shown unto you, my resurrected body. So we have this symbol of the earth. When Paul is describing the sacrament, he says, and this was an observation I made several years ago, he says the bread and the cup. He doesn't ever, at least in these 2 parts, doesn't reference the wine in the cup. He just says the bread and the cup. He refers to the cup. And I started wondering why there was that emphasis. And then I started thinking of the bitter cup that Christ said he was going to drink out of. And later I learned, and it's depicted really well in this, one of the latest movies a couple years back was called The Nativity, where we see Joseph offering Mary a cup. It was a way that the Jews were betrothed to one another. He would pass the woman the cup, and if she drank of the cup, she accepted the betrothal. And in that same sense, we, the church, the woman, the bride, we drink of the cup to accept Christ as the husband of the church, as a covenant relationship. So we have the 4 and the 1, or in other words, the square and the compass. These 2 symbols are very important in LDS theology, as are in many other cultures. We see squares and circles depicted all over the place. And when you put the square and the circle together, when you have the union of heaven and earth, you have a squared circle. eternity, time, heaven, earth, man and woman, spiritual and temporal, Father and the Son. And so this card can be represented as a union of the two. But in the sacrament, they're separate, and when we eat them, they come together inside of us, and 4 and 1 gives us 5. 5 is connected to life, grace, divine proportion, the human body. And if you look at the spiral in connection to that, you'll see many other really cool kind of connections. And you could bounce from one thing to the next. And so anyway, that's one of the ways that I use the cards to kind of study and come to understand things. The number 8, as we've already discussed, is connected with the ideas of rebirth and renewal. And that's certainly what's happening in the sacrament. We're kind of renewing, we're participating in these emblems of resurrection, rebirth, mediation. And one of my favorite things is I look around the LDS chapels, I notice a lot of chapels have 8 lights in them. I was at my sister's chapel in Texas one Sunday, and I noticed that there were 8 lights, and each of the lights, they were octagon shaped, divided into 8 parts. And there were octagon shaped clocks on the walls. In my chapel, there's an octagon shaped clock on the wall. There were 2, I don't know where the other one went. It's gone. Fell off or something and broke. It's probably in the library. But anyway, also on the outside of the doors, you'll see a lot of times 4 pillars, one set of 4 on one side and one set of 4 on the other. And like I was mentioning, in those ancient baptistries that you'll find in Europe, you'll see 8 pillars. And one of the things Val Brinkerhoff in his book, The Day Star, noted was that that's a way of demarcating sacred space. And so if you have 4 and 4, you have 8. So in my chapel, there aren't any pillars in that there's a structure that there are pillars needed to support. It's kind of flat, but there are these 4 pillars kind of implied using different colored bricks in the side of the building. And I thought to myself, why would they go through the extra effort of trying to imply the number 4 on each side of the building again in that manner? I'm not saying that that's exactly what it means or what it has to mean, but as I've pondered on these various things and have been aware of them, it's caused me to think about these particular doctrines and principles. And that's really, I think, the most important thing you can get out of this exercise, is that it's like reading the scriptures. You see certain words arranged in certain forms, and you start to think about different things, and that's where the Spirit can teach you. And understanding some of the meanings behind symbols is one of the most profound ways we can receive further inspiration and revelation from the Lord. And this is just one little tool I've put together to kind of help do that. There's many other ways you can use LDS symbol cards. The first thing you might want to do is just pull them out and study them. Maybe look into some of these books I have referenced here on the back. They're all fantastic. Try to get a basic understanding of how these things relate together. And visit a temple sometime. Take these with you. Pull them out. Hold them up. And pull out all the various cards that you see associated with that temple. Flip them over and see if maybe that temple was constructed with a certain theme in mind. And what story is kind of being told there that you could learn from. And I found that this practice is extremely thought-provoking and enlightening. And I hope that LDS symbol cards can be a great tool, whether you're an experienced veteran or you're a newbie and you're just trying to learn more about this. I think LDS symbol cards can be a great benefit. So I hope that you enjoy them. Good luck, and God bless you in your efforts.